Good evening. Welcome to the 2013 William K. Deal Endowed Leadership Lecture. This lecture was created to provide a venue to prepare future leaders and innovators in agriculture. I'm Wendy Winterstein. I serve as the Dean of the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. William Deal received a degree in agricultural education from Iowa State in 1958. After a brief teaching career and military service, he went on to farm near Bagley, Iowa for over 40 years. Today, Mr. Deal is a resident and active philanthropist in Panora. Mr. Deal is with us this evening with his wife, Judy, and his daughters, Tammy and Cindy. They're sitting in the front row, and they're going to wave for us. Could we have a round of applause for the Deal family? Our speaker for the evening is Dr. Howard Hill. Dr. Hill is President-elect of the National Pork Producers Council and Strategic Counsel to Iowa Select Farms. A native of California, Dr. Hill earned a doctorate of veterinary medicine from the University of California at Davis. He earned a master's degree and doctorate in veterinary microbiology here at Iowa State University. For 20 years, Dr. Hill led veterinary microbiology at Iowa State's Veterinary Diagnostic Laboratory. During that time, he served as an industry leader in the eradication of pseudorabies. He has been with Iowa Select Farms since 2000, when he joined the company as Director of Production. He has also served as Chief Operating Officer and Director of Animal Well-Being for the Iowa-based company. Iowa Select is the state's largest pork producer with more than 900 employees in 43 counties. In 2011, Dr. Hill was one of 9 veterinarians appointed to serve on the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Advisory Committee on Animal Health. Throughout his career, Dr. Hill has been involved in the Story County Pork Producers and is on the board of directors of the Iowa Pork Producers Association. He is past president of the American Association of Swine Veterinarians and is involved with state and national veterinary medical associations. Dr. Hill is also an active farmer. His production business, H&K Enterprises, includes hogs and cattle. Together with his son, he raises corn, soybeans, and alfalfa. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Howard Hill.
Thank you, Dr. Winterstein. Am I loud enough? Okay. Before I get started, I want to acknowledge some special people here. My family's here. My wife, Nancy, my best friend, my son, Eric, and his wife, Shan, my brother, Daryl. And I also want to recognize, we're talking about leadership and mentoring tonight, among other things, and I also want to acknowledge Dr. Seaton, who was my mentor for 20 years in the diagnostic lab as the director of the diagnostic lab. I have many other friends in here, and I appreciate everybody coming, but if I tried to acknowledge everybody, we'd be here all night. So I want to thank the Deal family. Mr. Deal, I appreciate the opportunity to give this lecture and what you've done for Iowa State. We appreciate that a lot. So when I asked what they wanted me to talk about, they said, well, you can really talk about most anything. And I asked for some information of the Deal family, and Mr. Deal has been interested all his life in technology and leadership, and so I am not an expert on leadership, so this is not going to be a whole lecture on leadership. We will talk a little bit about leadership. But what I have done is I've selected a few people in the industry, and it was very difficult to do, to pick out people that, where do you start and where do you stop? But what I tried to do is identify people that I knew very well that helped me in my career and had an impact on the pork industry into the future, and I think you'll see that as we go along. So we'll talk about 5 different individuals, and then I do want to talk about leadership, and I'm glad to see as many students that are here because those comments will be directed primarily at you, because all the gray hairs in here, there's no chance for them. So, and then I want to spend a little bit of time kind of celebrating pork production in the United States, and particularly in Iowa, and talk about the advancements and the progress that we've made. I've got some information over the last 50 years that the pork producers, the National Pork Producers Council has provided, and then I've got some information more precise the last 5 years, which I think you'll find very interesting. And then I'll talk a little bit about the future of the pork industry and where I think it's going and what the potential is. So the first person I'll talk about is Mr. Randy Stacker. Randy was from Kansas. He started out in the banking business, and the other thing that I didn't mention is my banker's here too. So really makes me nervous when my banker shows up, and there's a policeman back there too. So we'll try to keep it sane. So Randy, his career started really in Indiana with Charlie Yeager, and those who have been in the industry a long time probably remember the name of Yeager and Sullivan. They were probably one of the largest, or they were, I think, the largest supplier of feeder pigs at one time, brokering feeder pigs. They at one time they had 60,000 pigs on feed, which back in those days that was a lot of pigs to have on feed. Because of the variability of those pigs, the health and the growth and all that sort of thing, they wanted to get more consistent product, and so they built their first sow farm. And Randy tells the story that he had some visitors come to Purdue University, and they wanted to go on to a farm. They were from England, and they gave him a tour, and at the end of the tour, this Englishman said, "Well, you really don't know much about pig production, do you?" Which took him back a little bit. And this gentleman invited him to come over to England. So Randy put a team together and went over there for 3 weeks, and I think it's interesting what he said. The goal was to visit enough different farms to give a common thread of success. He didn't want to just go visit farms. He wanted to find farms that were successful. So in 1974, they built a 1,200 sow farm, and then you can see here on the slide, he became the general manager for PIC. Through that relationship, he met Wendell Murphy Family Farms, which is now part of Smithfield, who I'll also talk about, and grew that business. And Randy was the driving force behind that. Grew that business from 17,000 sows up to 330,000 sows. And then he became the general manager for Murphy Brown. Now, there's several things that I think will become clear here in a minute, but those of you that know him, he's a real motivator of people, and I can best relay his ability to do that by some of the quotes. Find people with good character. Recruit and develop a team of leaders and managers. Sometimes you have to get out of your industry to find creative solutions, and that's exactly what he did. He went to the poultry industry and looked what they were doing. He would go to any source he could to find new technology. And during that period of time, there was a lot of controversy about small versus big as the industry was consolidating. And his quote is, "I tell people they are bigger because they were better first, not they're not better because they're bigger." Could be somewhat controversial. Know yourself first. If you don't do anything else, recognize that you are the greatest asset you will ever manage in your life. I think that is a powerful statement, especially for you students. Then commit yourself to something that you have a great deal of opportunity to be successful at. Don't fret about your so-called weaknesses. You can surround yourself with people who have those strengths. If you choose to work in an organization, pick your boss. Be selective. Do not be selected. Again, a powerful statement. Early mentors have a disproportionate impact on your life. And I've told veterinary students the first job they take when they get out of veterinary school will be the most important job they take, because it'll set their sail for the rest of their career. Wendell Murphy. This was in 1997. This was not a particular complimentary article, and he actually didn't like it because they called him a billionaire, which he said he wasn't a billionaire. I don't know if he was or not. But the important thing here is that Mr. Murphy started out as a school teacher and grew his business to what it is today. As a school teacher, he saved $3,000, and he wanted to buy the Register Mill. I don't know if the mill's still there. When I worked there, the mill still stood. And his dad was a tobacco farmer, and he begged his dad to loan him $10,000 so he could buy this mill and manufacture feed. And his dad wouldn't loan it to him, kept bugging him. Finally, he said he would, but the condition was that he had to keep his day job. So he'd make feed at night and deliver feed at night. In 1969, he had a cholera outbreak, and he was completely wiped out. And so to get back into the business, he said he was providing feed to producers, and he noticed that the producers would never pay him until they sold the pigs. So he was financing it. So he said, I might as well have these folks contracts. So he would give them the fencing, the waters, the feeders, the pigs, and they would raise the pigs, and he'd get they would pay them $1 when those pigs were marketed. That was really the first large-scale contracting that was going on, and that became popular in the Southeast. Not a very popular concept in the Midwest for a long time. Of course, today we have a lot of contract production. The other thing then was that during this time, and they were starting to build all these farms, three-site production became a system which I'm going to talk about here. And the gentleman that really is primarily responsible for three-site production is actually in the audience. Dr. Hank Harris over here. Dr. Harris is famous for more than three-site production. He and Bob Glock, Dr. Glock was on faculty here with Dr. Harris, and they worked on a disease called swine dysentery or bloody scours and found the causative agent, which at that time was called Treponema hyodysenteria. We know it as B. hyo or Brachyspira hyodysenteria today. Hank worked for PIC and in their health management program, and he had a colleague in England that also worked with PIC. They had these high value multiplication farms and nucleus farms, and if they'd get a disease, they would have to depopulate them, and the only way they could repopulate them with real clean stock was to do cesarean sections and raise those pigs away from the dams. That's a very, very expensive process. And so working with Dr. Alexander, they developed a program called medicated early weaning, where they would medicate the sows, vaccinate the sows, medicate the pigs, but remove the pigs from the sow, because we know that when the longer that pig stays with the dam, the more disease agents they pick up. And so they recognized that removing these pigs from the dam at an early age would increase the health, especially if they were medicated. Well, that led them then into a production system that we know today as three-site production. And I'll show a slide here that kind of shows how this works. If you look up here, this is kind of traditional one-site operations. This is what we had in Iowa and the Midwest all through the up until the 80s and 90s. So you'd have your breeding, gestation, farrowing, all on one site. Those pigs would go to a nursery, again, that was on the same site, and then finishing on the same site. So you got a lot of transfer of disease from those sows. Those pigs, when they're born and they suckle, they get a high level of what we call maternal antibody. But the longer they stay with that sow, the more chance they are to pick up disease agents. So by breaking that cycle, using the 3-site method, we remove those pigs, take them to a nursery separated from this sow farm, and then they stay there until they're about 40 to 50 pounds. Then they were moved to a finisher and finished out. So you had three breaks here, and all these were all in, all out, washed, disinfected. So we really improved the health of those pigs. Later on, and this is the most popular system today in the Midwest, is to use 2-site production. Somebody figured out that if you would wean those pigs at the same time and put them into a regular finishing barn with little different feeders, comfort mats, and zone heating, you could keep those pigs in that finishing facility all the way to market. Did several advantages. One is you have a lot more airspace, so they were healthier. The other thing is you don't have to move the pigs, so you don't have the stress of moving the pigs and the stress on the people and the expense. So that's the system that most people are using today. I'll also say that Dr. Harris has another claim to fame. He's owner of Harris Vaccines, which is here in Ames, and he's got a very unique way of producing vaccines where he really doesn't need the infectious agent. He can use the genetic material and develop vaccines. The advantage is it can be done very, very quickly. Mr. Hansen is owner of Iowa Select Farms, and he was my boss for 13 years. Quickly, I'll just tell you one little story. He didn't go to college. He got married out of high school. They bought 3 sows, grew that to 150 sows, and his wife tells the story that she was the one letting the sows in and out twice a day, which got to be a big chore. And he was selling equipment, and she complained about all this hard work, and he saw this ad for elevated farrowing crates. So he started making those, kind of in their garage almost. And he put an ad in the newspaper that they were going to have an open house. They had this in their garage, thinking that a few people might show up. People started showing up at 8 o'clock in the morning. This is back in the 70s now. 8 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock at night, taking all kinds of orders. They had no financing. So Deb Hansen says, well, they knew they had to get financing, so they went to the local bank, and a fellow by the name of Dick Miller was there, and they had a business plan, laid out their business plan, and Dick says, well, you know, I think you've got a good plan here. I might be interested in helping you. And they had agreed before they went there that they were going to ask for $15,000, which is a lot of money in those times. And Mr. Miller said, well, Jeff, how much do you need? And he just blurted out, $50,000. And he still has a scar on his leg where Deb kicked him under the table. So the reason I use him as an example, though, is there's something unique about him that I didn't mention about the other people, and that is the fact that he never went to college. So even though you students are working hard to get degrees, and degrees are important, it's an example of where hard work, persistence, having a vision pays off. And it's probably another example of continuous lifelong learning. I mean, I know that you can't wait until you graduate because you think, no more tests. You'll continually have tests in your life. So they also, and I'm very proud of the fact they've been associated with the Hansens. They have the Hansen Foundation. Started that in 2006. They raise about $500,000 a year. A lot of that money goes for hunger relief in Iowa. They support Iowa military families. They support the Blank Hospital for children with childhood cancer. And the new hospital in Iowa Falls, they donated 1.5 million. And those of you that have seen or know about the student ag learning system, they were contributors to that, and that'll be a great asset for the College of Agriculture at Iowa State. I'm going to go quickly here. This is Jan Scheidemann, another example. He's a practitioner, but he's also an entrepreneur, and those are the companies that he started. And I asked Jan to send me some slides. They do embryo transfers, trans-ova. I imagine some of you are familiar with that. The thing that they're doing cloning now, very high-tech stuff. But the real reason that I wanted to talk about him is this slide here. The value, these are his words now, the value people. Treat internal and external customers like you would want to be treated yourself. Fundamental values, integrity and honesty, open communication, win-win relationship. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. So, leadership. If I asked 10 of you to identify leadership, I'd probably get 10 different answers, but I understand there's some students that are taking a leadership course right now. Is this group here? So you must have a good definition of leadership. Anybody want to share it? Would you agree with the top point that leadership is getting people to follow? Right. Leadership is influence. Each of us will be influenced by thousands of people in our lifetime, and we will influence thousands of people in our lifetime. Sometimes we get confused, what's a leader? And not everybody's going to be a leader. Not everybody wants to be a leader. And I'm not saying everybody has to be a leader, but sometimes we confuse leaders and managers. And managers are those that implement programs and that sort of thing. Leaders are those that provide the vision and motivate people. And we'll talk about that in a little more detail. So, how many of you students are familiar with John C. Maxwell? Anybody? He's a pastor, writes a lot, and gives a lot of lectures on leadership. And he talks about the 5 levels of leadership. First level being position or right. So, my example of that is the individual that owns a business and appoints one of their children in a responsible position. They may not have any leadership skills at all, but people have to respond to them because they're the boss. That's not leadership. Permission and relationship. People follow them because they want to. Okay, that person has shown that they can lead, and people will respond to it. The third, and these are progressive as you develop your leadership skills. Production results. These are where you're building a team, and people want to work in a team situation. So people follow because of what you have done for the organization. The fourth is people development. When your leader or your boss becomes interested in developing your career, it makes you want to do more for them. So people follow because of what you have done for them. And he says that the 5th category is personhood. People follow because of who you are and what you represent. And he says very few people reach that level of leadership. That's kind of the ultimate, if you will. So, one of the things that leaders have to do is to use our time efficiently. One of the most efficient times, one of the times that we're the most efficient is probably when you get ready to go on vacation. What do you do when you get ready to go on vacation? Dermot says, yeah, you get everything off your desk, you mow the lawn, you do everything at work, and you get everything arranged. You do things that you should have done for a long time, but you become very efficient, you get that done. But efficiency doesn't mean that you're being effective. Okay? It just means you're getting things accomplished, but they may not be all that, you may not be all that effective. So one way to think about it is efficiency is the foundation for survival. You have to do it. But effectiveness is the foundation for success. Setting priorities. How many of us have problems with setting priorities? I think we all probably do to some extent. In my case, if I've got a list of things to do, which ones do I do first? The ones I like to do, not necessarily the ones that are the most important. So again, Mr. Maxwell, he defines them as high importance, high urgency. You tackle those first, get them done, because those are important. High importance, low urgency. Set a deadline. They don't have to be done immediately, but set a deadline to get them done. Make sure they get done because they are important. Low importance and high urgency. You reduce your personal time. If you can, delegate it. Okay? And the fourth, low importance, low urgency, maybe you don't do it at all. Okay? Maybe you give it to somebody else to do. So, good leaders have integrity. I want to talk about integrity for a minute. I've got examples here of leaders. Everybody knows of Hitler, Jim Jones. Students, you all know who Jim Jones was? I see a few shaking their head. He was responsible. I think that's where the term drink the Kool-Aid came from. He was responsible for killing over 990 people and murdering 5 people, 1 a congressman. Martin Luther King, Winston Churchill, Dwight Eisenhower. You could name a lot of leaders in our lifetime or that went before us. But not all these are great leaders, obviously. Some of them have integrity, some of them didn't. Obviously, Jim Jones and Hitler didn't have much in the way of integrity. Integrity is a concept of consistency of action, values, principles, expectations, and outcomes. One's words and deeds match. You're not a hypocrite. What you say is what you do. And when we do our animal well-being training, we tell people we want you to handle animals the same way when somebody's watching as when nobody's watching. Because if you do it one way one time and you think somebody's not watching, that's not what we want. We want to do the right thing all the time. Leaders must be consistent in action and word to develop trust and loyalty in those they lead. And I will tell the students, you will be tested. Let me read a couple of quotes. I think this describes it pretty well. Billy Graham said, "Integrity is the glue that holds our way of life together. We must consistently strive to keep our integrity intact. When wealth is lost, nothing is lost. When health is lost, something is lost. When character is lost, all is lost." Another quote that I think sums it up pretty well is from President Eisenhower. "In order to be a leader, a man must have followers. And to have followers, a man must have their confidence. Hence, the supreme quality for a leader is unquestionable integrity. Without it, no real success is possible, no matter whether it's in a section gang or on the football field or in the army or in the office. If a man's associates find him guilty of being phony, if they find that he lacks forthright integrity, he will fail. His teachings and his actions must square with each other. The first great need, therefore, is integrity and high purpose." Okay, now, what I'd like to do next is to talk about what's changed in the swine industry with all this leadership that we've talked about. FAO, and I'm sure you've seen this quoted time and time again, FAO says, the Food and Agriculture Organization says that by 2050 we'll have 9 billion people. Have less than 7 billion today, we'll have 9 billion people on the planet. Food production is going to have to increase by 40%. We won't do that by discovering more land that we can plant. We're not going to be taking any more Amazon and deforesting it and putting cornfields and bean fields there. That's stopped. That's over with. So technology is what's going to drive the improvement in food, or the increase in food production. So these are some projects that we've had going on at the Pork Board. This is a study over the last 50 years comparing the productivity and the sustainability of pork production. So a few facts and figures here. Hogs marketed during this period of time, and this is 59 to 2009, I believe is this data, market increased 29%. The breeding herd decreased 39%. So we're producing 29% more pigs with 39% less sows. Over 2 times the carcass weight produced per sow per year. So another perspective here, in 1959, pork producers produced 12.1 billion pounds of pork. In 2009, they doubled that, 22.8 billion pounds. So when we talk about sustainability, what does sustainability mean? It doesn't make sense for us to develop a system that's not sustainable. First, to be sustainable, it has to be economically viable. Nobody's going to stay in business if they can't make money. It's got to be environmentally sustainable. And third, it has to be socially acceptable. And of course, that is a dynamic thing. The social, what the public expects of us is not a static value. It just keeps changing all the time. So the 4 pillars of sustainability that the Pork Board's worked on is the carbon footprint, water footprint, air footprint, and land footprint. So I'll give you some figures on this. In the international world, we're measuring sustainability a lot of times based on greenhouse gases. I was just in Paris last week at a sustainability meeting, and one person pointed out that that's probably not, it is one criteria, but it's not the only criteria to be used, mainly because you've got such a variety of different systems depending on where you are in the world, and some are producing a lot more greenhouse gases than others. But the important thing here is that the swine industry only produces about 1/3 of 1% of the greenhouse gases, and if you add all of livestock together, it's about 3%, okay, of all the greenhouse gases. Most of the greenhouse gases in livestock comes, of course, from the bovine, from the rumen gas. So, after all these calculations, they found that over the last 50 years that we've had a 78% reduction in land use, a 41% reduction in water, and a 35% reduction in the carbon footprint. And again, this is in the face of producing almost twice as much pork as we did 50 years ago. So just to summarize that, hogs marketed 29%, breeding herd decreased 39%, twice as much pork. The land, when they do these life cycle analysis, it's not just looking at the pork production, it's also looking at what pork production uses. So this is also taking into consideration the improvements that we've made in crop production. So it would be corn, soybeans, and that sort of thing. So we've got this tremendous story to tell and something that we should celebrate. This is a little bit more up-to-date data. Nauer and Hostetler published this just recently in the Journal of Swine Health and Production, 2013. This was data from 2005 to 2010. And, you know, you hear people quote that pork production is increasing by 2% a year or 3% a year with the same number of sows. But getting that data has been difficult. So this was some very good work. I'm actually not going to show you this work. I'm going to show you some work that was that's related to this. The folks, Dr. Stadler at Iowa State here and his grad student took that data. They've updated it now, and you can see from the title there, they're looking at 2007 to 2012 instead of 2005 to 2010. And we'll look at some of this data, and I hope you can see this. So one thing that's to point out here is that in 2007, they were looking at 29 companies. Now, when we say company, that could be an individual pork producer, 849 farms, but as they have progressed, you can see that we're getting a lot better data set here. We're getting more companies or more producers and a lot more farms, so the data just gets more powerful as we go. So these are some of the KPIs or the key productive indicators that they looked at. Pigs mated per sow per year, total born, stillborns, number born live, number weaned, pre-weaning mortality, weaning weight, wean age, the nursery mortality, days to in the nursery, and feed conversion, same thing in finishers. So let's look at some of this data. So in this case, you can see that mortality has taken a real turn for the better, almost better than 2 pigs percent less. And I think everybody that's in pork production or associated with it knows that we continue to raise that market weight. You can see we've gone in 5 years here from 260 pounds to 271 pounds in 2011, and we dropped off a little bit here. Why is that? We got some production students here. It might have something to do with feed cost. Nobody wanted to feed that expensive feed any longer than they had to. So now we'll probably see those weights come back up as feed costs have come down. Average daily gain, that's a huge cost benefit. 1/10 of a pound is absolutely huge. That's average daily gain. Conversion is about 4/400ths. We continually make better use of our feedstuffs. That figure can be a little misleading when you're comparing feed efficiency because it doesn't take into consideration differences in diets. So as you get more dense diets, higher calorie diets, your feed efficiency is going to get better. But at least we've got enough data here that you sure see a trend. This is wean to finish. Again, better mortality, higher weights, not a lot of difference in gain. Feed conversion, it hasn't changed much in wean to finish. Nurseries, probably one of the most interesting things here is some work that was done by Dr. Roger Main when he was a grad student at Kansas State University. Really changed how we think about weaning age. He's now the director of the diagnostic lab here at Iowa State. But the work that he did showed that if you weaned later, your reproductive performance was much better because that sow had time to recover. And also, the diets that you fed those pigs, because they're a little bit bigger, were less expensive, and your mortality was better. And so we had a trend for a long time to go younger and younger and younger. People got down weaning pigs as low as 10 days. Now the trend is the other way. In Europe, they have laws that say they have to be 28 days or 25 days or whatever. We don't have any law like that, but the law of economics has moved that age up. Sow farms. Probably the most significant thing here is litter size, and we can thank the geneticist for that, but also production practices. better AI techniques. We have sow farms now that will have 14 born live or over 14 born live, 14 total born with 13 born live, and we'll be weaning 11 and a half, 12 pigs. And you can see here that where's our weaning number weaned. I think we've got about a 0.8 increase. If you multiply 0.8 times the 5.8 million pigs, that's about 5 million pigs a year in 5 years. I think I'm going to skip through these because I think I've summarized those already. So let's look at the growth potential then of the U.S. pork industry. Domestic demand. This is one of our consultants is Dr. Steve Meyer. He's an ag economist. He owns Paragon Economics, and he monitors all this stuff for us on a regular basis. Year over year, our domestic demand based on real per capita expenditure. It's not based on tons or anything like that. So that's a reflection of the increased cost of meat, but also the increase in quantity. It combines both of those. Year over year, 6% increase. Year to date, 2.5%. And his comment here is beef and chicken prices are helpful. We all know what's happened. We've got the lowest beef herd in 50 years or so, and beef prices are high. Chicken is actually more expensive because of some of the things that some of the fast food restaurants have done. Kentucky Fried Chicken with their boneless. They're buying bigger chickens and they're boning it now. So the price of chicken has gone up. So that makes pork a better buy, comparatively speaking, in the supermarket. About 3 weeks ago, Hy-Vee had boneless loins for $1.77. You can't buy better value protein. Whoop. So exports, tremendous potential. In 2012, we increased our exports to about 27%. So about 1 out of every 4 pigs we marketed. Now, we don't market a whole pig. And one of the advantages of trade is that we can trade things that aren't as valuable to us in our market as they might be in another market. So if you go to Southeast Asia, you're going to have chicken feet, ears, face, tails, and internal organs. About 3% of that 27% is what we call variety meats, all the things that are not the muscle meat. And that has tremendous value back to the packer and that in turn back to the producer. Some of the big things on the horizon are the free trade agreements that we've negotiated, the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Transatlantic Trade Investment Investment Partnership. That's the trade between the EU and the United States. And China, of course, is a huge potential. So food inflation is a major concern in China. There's a tremendous growth of the middle class. Anytime you have an increase in the middle class, they want more protein in their diet. I'm now paraphrasing from Dr. Dermot Hayes here. He's another one of our consultants, kind of the god of export data. And I remember probably 5-6 years ago, Dr. Hayes was saying, the Chinese are going to try to build their swine industry, but eventually they'll give up because it's so much more expensive for them to import the grain to feed those pigs, and they'll eventually get around to importing the pork, which is starting to happen. U.S. is the lowest cost producer. Dr. Hayes has said that 1% of China's pork supply is worth $1 billion to the U.S. pork industry. And also that adds about 6,000 jobs. Am I close on that? 6,000 jobs. So I also have to give credit to my friend Joe Kearns here for this concept of what's going to happen with the Chinese. Back in the late 90s, the Chinese were trying to be self-sufficient in soybean production. And you hear today that soybean producers know that one out of every 4 rows is going to get shipped to China. And you can see what's happened to their imports of soy. I hope this shows up. This line here is their exports. They used to be an exporter of corn. Okay, they were one of our competitors. This was probably bad crop or something, I don't know. But look what's happened over the last 5 years here. Pretty steady growth in the importation of corn into China. They don't have land. They've run out of land. China's a big, big country, but there's something called the Gobi Desert where nobody lives, and they can't grow anything out there. And they've got a huge population. You know, the Chinese government definitely doesn't want 1.3 billion people being mad at them for not having enough food. So food security is very, very important to them. Pork is the meat of choice. If you look, blue is pork, and you look at any country in Southeast Asia, and pork is going to be the primary meat. Hong Kong, look at this. There's another one. Taiwan. So you'd say, well, why can't the Chinese produce more pork? Because they're not very efficient. Even though they've modernized their pork production using basically American technology, they haven't been able to really increase their production per sow. This is Continental Grains data, and you can see that over the last, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, they really haven't changed their overall pigs per sow per year. A lot of the production is still small herds, backyard herds, family-owned operations. So this is a slide that our trade guru at NPPC likes to show, and it shows what the trend is with exports, and a lot of that goes to the credit of the free trade agreements that we've had. So NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, that's the agreement between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. And I'll show you a slide here in a minute to show what the impact of Mexico exports are to us. We've got Russia. Russia's a bad player when it comes to international trade. I'll show you why here in a minute. And just recently we negotiated the last 3 here, Korea, Colombia, and Panama. And when you negotiate these free trade agreements, the tariffs don't go away immediately, but they eventually go to nothing. And we've never negotiated a free trade agreement where pork is involved where we didn't eventually get to a 0 tariff. And that's what we want in the TPP and the TTIP. It's going to be a real challenge with, maybe not so much with TTP, but definitely with TTIP. This is a busy slide, but I just want to show you, this is the exports to Japan. And this purple line here is exports to Mexico. And I said Mexico is our largest volume. It doesn't look like it. This is on volume. But this is muscle meat. It doesn't include the variety meats. When you add the variety meats, Mexico is our largest volume. Japan is our largest value. And Canada, of course, is right in here, this light blue. Or no, Canada is, this purple. Okay. The red here is Korea. And this spike right here, we were shipping a lot of pork to Korea. Anybody remember what happened back in, 2011? Any students? They had a disease called foot and mouth, and so they had to eliminate about 25% of their herd. Now they've regained that, and so their imports temporarily are down, but we think that that'll still be a good market for us. Here's what I was talking about with Russia. Russia is trying to be self-sufficient in pork, and they put a lot of phytosanitary roadblocks in our way. They'll delist plants. They're not a very trustworthy partner. Some packers have told me that if the Russians come to them and want to buy meat, they'll sell meat, but they're not interested in trying to really push that because they just can't trust them as a loyal trader. I think the important point here, I'm not going to go through all this, but the important point is that as we negotiate these trade agreements, we want to make sure that all the phytosanitary issues are taken off the board and that the tariffs eventually go to zero. And what I mean by phytosanitary things is things like trichina. We don't have trichina. That's why your mother cooked your pork chop till it was shoe leather. Everybody thought that you had to cook pork until it was so hard you couldn't hardly eat it. We don't have trichina in our domestic population today, our domestic production. That might not be true with some outside produced pork, where they still could contract trichina, but it's not an issue for our mainline pork production. Japan joining the TPP was a game changer. I've got a list of those 12 countries that are in TPP: Australia, Brunei, Canada, Chile, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore, U.S., and Vietnam. And if you've read the newspapers recently, even China now is maybe talking about joining TPP. That would be huge. The TTIP, again, this is the trade agreement between the EU and the United States. There was supposed to be a meeting on the 7th, and there's something about some government problem. I'm not sure what happened, but it got canceled. So in wrapping up here, I guess what I'd like to say to the students is that I've had veterinary students say, well, how did you decide you wanted to do such and such in your career? And I said, I didn't decide that. I said, I just took advantages of opportunities as they became available to me. And that's what I would say to you students. You're going to have chances to take a little risk, and don't be afraid to take risk. And I'm going to quote from a famous philosopher. She said, do something even if it's wrong. You remember her saying that? That was my mother. But this probably says it better. This poem: there was a very cautious man who never laughed or played. He never risked, he never tried, he never sang or prayed. And when one day he passed away, his insurance was denied. For since he never really lived, they claimed he never really died. So thank you very much. Pardon? Sure.
So Howard has agreed to take some questions. We have questions from the audience.
Betsy.
Hello, Betsy Freeze, Successful Farming. Can you talk about the new swine disease that has emerged this year and what your thoughts are on that, especially for Iowa?
Yeah. What Betsy's talking about is a disease called porcine epidemic diarrhea. It's a coronavirus. It's very similar to TGE, but probably the best description I've heard is that it's TGE on steroids. This virus is more resistant than TGE. Usually we don't think about TGE being transmitted in the summertime, and this virus has been spreading from herd to herd during the summer. We're very concerned about what happens when we get into cold weather, because viruses typically survive better in cold, damp weather. The alarming thing about this is, where did it come from? And I got to give credit to the diagnostic lab here at Iowa State. They did a fabulous job of getting this virus, this disease, diagnosed. They developed a PCR which identifies the virus. They quickly, working with the National Veterinary Services Laboratory, identified that it was PED. PED is not a new virus in the world. It was first identified in 1971 in England. It's fairly endemic in Southeast Asia. The thing that's really concerning is that when they sequenced the genetic makeup of this virus, it was 99.6, 99.5, the same as the Chinese strain that was reported a year before. That's the second virus that we brought in from China. One of the circoviruses we feel it was also a Chinese strain. The first outbreaks occurred in 4 separate locations, one in Indiana, one in Ohio, 2 in Iowa. The 2 in Iowa were geographically separated by many, many miles, all within the same week. So we're assuming, and we haven't been able to find, quote, the smoking gun, but we're assuming that it had to come in with some kind of a common feedstuff or something that was common. We've got still doing investigations trying to pin that down. We've got people looking at lots of ingredients, feed premixes, all the different ingredients, trying to identify that. The situation right now today in Iowa is that it's pretty quiet. We haven't had a lot of outbreaks recently, but North Carolina is really getting hammered. Our estimate right now is that we're probably between April and today, we're probably approaching 500,000 sows. If you do the math on that, you lose pigs. I mean, it's practically 100% mortality in the farrowing house for about 4 to 5 weeks. So you do the math, you're million, what did we do, a million two, I think is what we calculated, if you use 25 pigs per sow per year on 500,000 sows. So it is a significant problem. Some people ask about the vaccine. I mentioned Dr. Harris has a method where he can produce vaccine very fast. He has a vaccine that's in trial, and we're waiting for some results to see how effective it is in challenge studies. We hope that is a tool we can use. Other questions about that, Betsy, or anybody else?
Well, we're not getting the research that we were because the government shut down. So.
We're not getting any numbers. We don't even know what the price of hogs is. Yeah. NPPC, I mentioned Steve Meyer. NPPC is working with Steve Meyer to develop a private system of what the market actually is, and that's supposed to, maybe if it goes live, it's supposed to go live maybe this week. If it does go live, as soon as the USDA marketing service comes back online, it'll go dark though. So, do you know anything about that, Dermot or John? Either one of you know? Okay. Right now, People don't even know what the price of hogs are. Now, the other thing we're doing is we've been negotiating with the USDA Ag Marketing Service, saying that these are essential. And if you've noticed, they've brought a lot of people in the federal government back on the payroll. And the first comment was that, well, there's no human health issue or national security issue. Arguably, that's probably true, but when you have the federal government providing that essential service and it disappears, you can't do business. So.
Now, I know there's some other events that started at 8 o'clock, so if students need to leave, you should feel free to do that. But we'll go on another question for our speaker. Any more questions? Wide audience tonight. Right? Well, if not, Howard, thank you so much. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Great job, Howard. Great job, Howard. Great job, Howard. Great job, Howard. Great job, Howard.